In tonight's news edition, the Syrian army backed by Russian forces intensifies their assault around the city of Aleppo, an attack that has prompted tens of thousands of Syrians to seek refuge in Turkey. The Syrian foreign minister asserts the recent gains signal that the war is nearing its end and warns against any ground incursion into his country. And a powerful earthquake strikes Taiwan, killing at least 12 people, most in a 17-story apartment building that collapsed, with some people still missing. Good evening and welcome to the news at 10. His Majesty King Abdullah returned home following a working visit to Britain and Ireland. In London, the first leg of the King's European tour, King Abdullah, along with world leaders, took part in the London Donor Conference, which was dedicated to supporting Syrian refugees. In his keynote address to the conference, King Abdullah highlighted the burden shouldered by Jordan as a result of hosting a large number of refugees on its territory. The king also pointed to efforts being exerted by Jordan to counter terrorism that threaten global peace and security. On the sidelines of the conference, King Abdullah held a series of meetings with heads of state and top officials taking part in the gathering. In Dublin, the second leg of the royal tour, King Abdullah met with the Irish President Michael Higgins and Prime Minister Enda Kenny and discussed the latest regional and international developments. The Syrian army, backed by Russian forces, intensified an assault on rebel-held areas around the city of Aleppo, prompting tens of thousands to seek refuge across the border. On Thursday, the government captured several more villages in the surrounding countryside, leading to fears they could encircle the city. Aleppo is divided between pro-Syrian forces and a range of rebel groups who have maintained control of much of the city since they took it in 2012, and taking full control of Aleppo would be a huge strategic gain for the government. Advances were also reported in other areas, with the official news agency Sana reporting that Syrian forces killed scores of terrorists from Jaish al-Fatah group in the province of Hama. The Syrian Air Force also launched airstrikes against militants in Idlib province, inflicting huge losses on their properties and forces. The assault on Aleppo has forced tens of thousands to flee to the Turkish border to seek refuge. Around 35,000 Syrian refugees arrived at the Turkish border near the southern city of Kilis in the last 48 hours, while another 70,000 are expected to arrive. The border gate of Onkupinar near the southern city of Kilis was closed, but that did not stop dozens of Syrians from queuing, requesting Turkish authorities to allow them and their relatives from the other side. Ankara has had an open-door policy to refugees since the start of the civil war, although some of the borders do get shut at times for security or other reasons. Onkupinar has been officially shut since March due to security concerns, but opens occasionally to take in refugees. The Turkish foreign minister said refugees at the gate were being accommodated at camps on the Syrian side of the border and were given food, blankets, and tents. The Turkish foreign minister was speaking in Amsterdam after a meeting with EU foreign ministers. EU foreign policy chief Federica Mogherini said it was clear the Syrians fleeing were in need of protection, while the German foreign minister reiterated the German position that the Syrian conflict could not have a military solution and called on the international community to put pressure on different stakeholders so they return to the negotiating table.
We still keep this open border policy for these people fleeing from the aggression of the regime, as well as airstrikes of Russia. And these people are fleeing from such acts, so we need to keep this open door policy for them. We have received already more than 5,000 of them. Another 55,000 of them are on the way, and we cannot leave them there alone.
There is a moral, if not a legal duty, there is also a legal duty for the non-refoulement to protect those in need of international protection, asylum seekers. It is unquestionable the fact that people coming from inside Syria are Syrians in need for international protection.
We must once again build pressure, build political pressure so that the political process can continue. I cannot imagine that after the events of the past few days that someone can imagine that this conflict will still have a military solution. We must go back to the political process.
German Chancellor Angela Merkel called for better protection at the European Union's external borders in order to maintain the passport-free Schengen zone. Merkel, who opened her country's borders to Syrians fleeing civil war last summer, is under increasing pressure to limit the influx of migrants after more than 1 million arrived in Germany last year. A poll published this week showed popular support for Merkel had tumbled, with more than 80% of Germans doubting her government had the refugee crisis under control. In her weekly podcast, she said that failing to protect the EU's external borders would jeopardize free movement of people.
We need to protect our external borders because we want to keep Schengen. Because if we don't protect our external borders, the free movement at the domestic markets, which is the source for our wealth, is in danger, and that needs to be prevented. And I think that all EU member states agree on that.
In Damascus, the Syrian foreign minister said Syria will resist any ground incursion into its territory without the agreement of the Syrian government. Speaking to a news conference, Walid al-Muallim said Syria will see an incursion on its territory as an act of aggression and a violation of its sovereignty. Al-Muallim's comments capped a week that saw the collapse of UN-led efforts to launch indirect peace talks between the Syrian government and opposition delegation in Geneva. The talks were forced to be adjourned after the opposition said there was no point negotiating while the Syrian army escalated attacks and gained ground north of Aleppo. But Al-Muallim asserted that the recent territorial gains signaled that the war is nearing its end. He added that the Syrian government was ready to have dialogue with the opposition, but without preconditions. And in the ongoing fight against Daesh terrorists, the United States and its allies targeted the group with a total of 16 strikes in Iraq and Syria since yesterday. The U.S. military said in a statement today that out of the 14 strikes in Iraq, 5 hit near Mosul, hitting tactical units and command and control nodes. While in Syria, 2 strikes were conducted near Ain Isa, hitting Daesh vehicles and buildings. Back here at home, a German parliamentary delegation led by President of the German Parliament, the Bundestag, Norbert Lammert, visited the Zaatri camp to check on conditions of Syrian refugees and services being provided. Director of the camp, Colonel Abdulrahman Lemouche, briefed the delegation on the services offered to the refugees in the water, health and educational fields. Accompanied by the German ambassador to Jordan, Lammert reiterated his country's support to Jordan in addressing the challenges facing it in light of the large number of Syrian refugees.
We highly appreciate the efforts exerted by Jordan to host a large number of Syrian refugees, and Germany is concerned with following up on these efforts and services to provide for the refugees. Germany will continue to do its utmost to provide the necessary support to the kingdom to enable it to play its humanitarian role towards the refugees and overcome the burden shouldered by Jordan due to hosting an increasing number of Syrian refugees.
Minister of State for Media Affairs and Communications Mohammed al-Momani voiced the government's condemnation of Israel's violation against the Umayyad palaces area of the south and southwest of Al-Aqsa Mosque Al-Haram Al-Sharif. In its continued violations against Islamic sites and heritage in occupied Jerusalem, Israeli authorities have recently set up metal and wooden platforms to expand the yards designated for Jewish prayers next to the mosque's western wall. Jordan, meanwhile, continues to demand Israel to return the palaces to the jurisdiction of the Awqaf Department in Jerusalem. At least 9 people were killed and 40 wounded when a suicide bomber blew himself up near a military convoy in Pakistan's western city of Quetta. Police say the attackers rode a bicycle into a convoy belonging to the Pakistan's paramilitary Frontier Corps. At least 3 Frontier Corps personnel were killed and 15 were injured in the attack. The Pakistani Taliban spokesman said the group was responsible for the attack in the capital of the province of Balochistan. The province, the poorest and least developed in Pakistan, has seen nearly a decade of separatist violence against the government and non-Baluch ethnic groups. Rescuers worked into the night after a powerful 6.4 magnitude earthquake struck Taiwan early in the morning, killing at least 12 people, most in a collapsed 17-story apartment building. Search parties were looking inside the collapsed building while smoke and ashes welled out from some of the openings in the broken-down structures. Authorities said there were 96 apartment units in the Golden Dragon building and 256 registered residents, though more were in the building when it collapsed. Rescuers pulled over 240 survivors from the ruins, but many are still missing in the rubble. Buildings in 9 other locations in the city of 2 million had collapsed, and 5 were left tilting at alarming angles. City officials said it was too early to determine if poor construction was a factor in the building collapse. Taiwan last experienced a major earthquake in 1999, which killed about 2,400 people. A rare and historic Ferrari racing car sold for a record price of $35.6 million at an auction in Paris. The 1957 Ferrari 335 Sports Caglietti is one of the most iconic racing cars in motorsports, and the specific vehicle sold is one of only 4 ever produced. This model was driven through the iconic 12 hours of Sebring race that same year and the grueling endurance test of the 24 hours of Le Mans. Some of the age's greatest racers sat behind the wheel of this car. The masterpiece vehicle was bought by a bidder from the United States. Super Bowl commercials are a big deal. At a cost of up to $5 million for a 30-second spot that's often full of celebrities, pop music, and special effects, advertisers are clearly willing to pay a premium to be part of the big game. The Super Bowl is the only television broadcast of the year guaranteed to draw a gigantic audience. Lots of brands, including some who have never advertised in the Super Bowl before, are coming in this year. Last year's game was watched by 114.4 million viewers, the most people who have ever watched a TV broadcast in the U.S. That record will quite possibly be broken this year with a game between Denver Broncos and the Carolina Panthers, the top seeds in the American Football Conference and the National Football Conference.
Lots of brands like big names like Amazon and Colgate, who have never advertised in the Super Bowl before, are coming in. And then you're seeing a lot of smaller brands, names like Apartments.com, Quicken Loans, SoFi, SunTrust, just a bunch of smaller brands really looking to come and be a part of the big game, more so than we've seen in the last couple of years.
And so America is gearing up for the all-action razzmatazz of Super Bowl 50 tomorrow, with the Carolina Panthers and Denver Broncos facing each other in California. Tibet the Tigress decided the Panthers will be the Super Bowl winners after a high-speed chase involved remote control cars at the Myrtle Beach Safari. The female tiger was offered 2 remote control cars as prey, one with the Carolina Panthers helmet on top and one with a Denver Broncos helmet. Both the cars and the tiger are capable of speeds of up to 64 kilometers per hour, and the Tibet showed her prowess in following the agile cars before clearly favoring the one with the Panthers helmet on top to make her pick. Manchester United have opened talks about Jose Mourinho becoming their next manager. Mourinho, who was sacked by Chelsea in December, has been tipped as a potential replacement for Louis van Gaal after a string of poor results and uninspiring performances. According to media reports, Mourinho could replace Van Gaal in the summer. If appointed, Mourinho would resume his often fractious rivalry with Pep Guardiola, who Manchester City this week confirmed will succeed Manuel Pellegrini. As former Barcelona and Real Madrid coaches, Guardiola and Mourinho frequently clashed. And finally, a look at the weather. A cold and wet air mass will affect the kingdom tonight, bringing lower temperatures and heavy rain to the northern regions that will gradually extend to the central parts of the kingdom. Snow showers are also expected after midnight on the southern Sahara Mountains. Tomorrow, the kingdom will remain under the effect of the cold air mass. Therefore, temperatures will further drop, becoming 3 to 4 degrees below their seasonal average, and the weather will continue to be cold and rainy in most parts of the kingdom. The Gulf of Aqaba should expect relatively cold conditions with a slight chance for rain, while winds will be northerly moderate to brisk and the seas choppy. The weatherman warns of poor visibility in the Badia and of flash floods in low-lying areas. Next are the lows and highs for tonight and tomorrow. To end the news, here's a reminder of our top stories. The Syrian army, backed by Russian forces, intensifies their assault around the city of Aleppo, an attack that has prompted tens of thousands of Syrians to seek refuge across its border in Turkey. The Syrian foreign minister asserts the recent gains signal that the war is nearing its end and warns against any ground incursion into his country. And powerful earthquake strikes Taiwan, killing at least 12 people, most in a 17-story apartment building that collapsed, with some people still missing in the ruins. With that, we come to the end of tonight's news. I'm Nancy Khair. Thank you for watching and have a good night.